Good evening and welcome to Concord Victory. Tonight we're joined by Jeremy Moody, Secretary and Advisor to the Central Association of Agricultural Valuers, one of the most influential voices in the UK rural sector.
Over the past 3 decades, Jeremy has helped shape much of the policy and legislation affecting land, farming and the countryside, from taxation and the tenancy of law to environmental reform. Recently, recognised with the Farmers' Weekly Lifetime Achievement Award, he continues to guide us how we think about land use, ownership and stewardship.
He's here to help us understand what a land agent really does and why the role is so vital to the future of rural Britain, and how young people can train to enter this remarkable profession.
So, to start, the CAAV has long played a key role in interpreting how the government policy affects rural land. What are the biggest regulatory or political pressures currently facing land agents in the UK?
I think, thank you for the kind words and the introduction. I think we're at a really fascinating point in looking at where rural land management is now going, probably about the most fascinating time in most people's lifetimes, in that government has changing its policy very radically towards agriculture and land management, and leaving farmers very much to make their own decisions about where they go, how they run their businesses, much more exposed to markets than they were, in a climate of very considerable competition for land use, all the various claims on what we might do with land. And so it's not just a matter, as it's been for some time, of navigating particular schemes and policy frameworks. It's a matter of actually helping farmers, estate owners, land managers find their way through this to see what are the best roads for them, for their businesses, for their objectives, and to help them into the future. And I think in that we are going to see a lot of change because of the removal of the old structures, particularly in England, but to some extent across the whole UK. We see major changes coming through with the background of more extreme weathers, with climate change, new technologies, and so on. But it's in terms of the policy changes, is that shift of government attitude over the last few months is quite remarkable, and it's how we make the best of that, and then understand other changes as they come along, but helping people find their own businesses and their own ways through.
Yeah, thank you. Environmental policy is reshaping the countryside, from biodiversity net gain to the shift in agricultural subsidies. How are these changing, redefining the day-to-day work of a land agent?
In some ways, it doesn't necessarily at all. There's a very old concept in managing the countryside called stewardship, which is that you're trying to leave a better countryside than you came to it. And a lot about sustainability and so on can be seen through that light. But you have these new tools that are there. There are opportunities for people to earn money or improve their land for future generations. We have to do a great deal with soils to protect the future sustainability, partly for productivity, partly for water management, partly for biodiversity. There are opportunities for some people in biodiversity net gain, as you've mentioned, and in other schemes and landscape recovery and so on. And they all create options. But they're options to be looked at on their merits. They might not necessarily be the right options for some people or for some land. And for example, I'm doing a lot of work at the moment around Lowland peat, which is both often very productive farmland. It is also, as it dries out, a major source of carbon emissions. And finding the ways in which we can best balance those so that we can remain income earning, producing food, but reduce what is a significant source of carbon emissions is an interesting task, which varies between different peat soils, different parts of the country, different issues. And that's where coming to understand what matters to an individual and in a particular circumstance becomes very important. And we come to the skills of the land agent in understanding people, understanding situations, finding individual answers.
You mentioned earlier about the change in government policies, and how will inheritance tax put on farmland affect the job of the land agent and the market of land?
In terms of inheritance tax, this is an enormous prompt for everybody. In the simple terms, the immediate job is that it makes the valuation for inheritance tax much larger, much more complex, needing to know much more for valuation purposes about machinery and livestock and other things on the farm, as well as what's had to be done in the past around land and dwellings. But the larger and broader issue, and again, calling very much on individual skills and people skills and thinking about the kinds of things I've talked about, is that this is a prompt for families and farmers to think about the future. Where do they want the business to go? How do they want to minimize their risk of large tax bills? But how should they best protect and further their business? And that means sitting down with people. It means trying to find out who actually does own what, because that's often more complicated than it might seem. Where do they want to go? And where is the future lying? And that's different if you're 40 or 60 or 80 in the circumstances you're in, and who else is involved in the business, and do people want to come on? And that is the larger, broader job, because you have to help the family find their way through. And then you're working with the other professionals, the lawyers and the accountants, to give effect. It's not just talking about it, it's getting decisions implemented. It's following it through into real change and action so that they do look after themselves for the future.
What pathways currently exist for students who want to qualify as rural chartered surveyors or land agents, and how accessible are they?
They're accessible. The main routes that people take, and there are many routes that people find, but the main routes are through a land management course or rural estate and land management at one of the universities that offers this. So primarily that will be Harper Adams University in Shropshire, the Royal Agricultural University in Cirencester. There's a new course running at Plumpton down in Sussex. A number come through Reading. Sometimes people come through land economy at Cambridge. And then in Scotland, you've got the Scottish Rural University College also offering courses. But frequently people come at it also a little more sideways. And they may have done, as being talked to by Newcastle University, which runs a sustainable agricultural land management degree course. People have come in from agriculture in Aberystwyth and so on, and then they make their way further forward. But the classic route in is to use those land management courses, then to find an employer and to train. And what we do have, though, now is a couple of universities, Harper Adams in Shropshire, Plumpton in Sussex, that are offering blended courses so that you both work and study at the same time, which for a practical profession can often be a powerful way in, because you're meeting real problems just at the same time as you're studying them, and there's a synergy in that. And then it is practical experience out in the field, and then passing your professional qualifications, the CAAV exams, if you're coming in through the CAAV, if you're looking at a chartered surveyor, passing the APC, those all turn on you having a level of practical experience.
The sector can often struggle with public perception. Many people outside agriculture have little idea what a land agent does. How can the profession communicate with schools and universities to give students more of a broad idea?
Yes, this is one of those long-standing questions, and we're working at it at the moment particularly hard through our Route to Rural programme, trying to explain to people in schools and other courses at universities, and people coming out of second careers as though they're coming out of the army or elsewhere, to explain who we are, the variety of work that's offered. And that, in a sense, is one of the challenges we face, is that we're trying to explain a great variety of work. You can be helping manage a great rural estate. You can be in private practice in a firm, giving individual farmers and owners advice. You could be working for the valuation office for the government. You could be working for an environmental charity. All the various avenues in, but we're trying to pull the threads. We're trying to pull the threads of that together and explain this is about being a professional, working in the countryside, being practical with people. And we are trying to convey the sense that that can make you a trusted advisor on whom clients will look to and rely for the support you can give them in taking their businesses forward. So we're trying to make a stronger attempt to explain that to people. And very much, I hope this interview indeed can be part of that. But it is something that we are very much working at the moment. And we had a virtual insight day just a couple of weeks ago, and the webinar of that, explaining the recording of that, explaining something about the main strands in the profession, is available on our website for anybody to look at.
How has technology from GIS mapping to drone surveying and data analytics transformed the skill set expected of new entrances into land management?
Yeah, this is a world that's always changing. If you go back over a century, people had then to work out how to use cars. People use calculators. 40 years ago, quite a lot of effort at the beginning was in colouring in and organising maps to go with agreements. And of course, all that has been then now transferred to computers. GIS fits very nicely with precision farming and the exact application of efficient inputs. But it matters for mapping, it matters for overlaying the different things you want to know about a piece of land, its environmental history, its soil quality, and other factors. Drones enable you to look at roofs and how well repaired they are in a way that you could never have done before. And that does that much more efficiently. And it gives you an aerial surveillance of what's happening with crops or other things. So this is always moving, and the big one that people are now obviously coming to work to understand is artificial intelligence. How do you use that? How do you know when it's telling you what's right, and how do you know it's just making it up and shouldn't be relied on? And that's the blend of seeing it as an assistant while you supply the judgment and the practical knowledge to help work with it. So this is going to be an evolving field still, but you have to use the new technologies. The clients use them, and to be efficient in business, you will need to use them.
With rising land values and energy infrastructure projects and competing demands for food, housing, and carbon storage, do you think the traditional model of rural estate management is under pressure and strain?
No, not really. I think they all simply play to the long-run challenges of how you make the best of the assets that you have. If you look back into the middle 19th century at how varied rural estates were and the number and range of commercial activities they had then, it then eroded as the 19th century became the 20th, but we're now rebuilding that. It's the real challenge embedded in that, in your question, is about how do we manage the competing uses for land? And that's understanding what works best in which location. A nice example of that may lie with the growth of solar farms now. They work best where they have a very good grid connection. That grid connection may also be, for historic reasons, also where there's good arable land. That's an interesting conflict to play through and work out which is the best answer to pursue. And that there, when you're managing an estate, you're looking into the middle distance, the long run. You're thinking what will work best for the coming decades, not necessarily the easiest shilling now, but what is the most sustainable answer. We've developed on-farm renewable energy to supply the needs of the farm or of the estate. And I can think of one country house up in Yorkshire, which went for its own ground source heat pump. That is probably the first time that house has ever been properly heated because of the opportunities that are now being offered. So it changes what you have to choose between, but the underlying skills of trying to understand and advise as to what will work best are the old skills. I was looking just before this interview at the history of Stowe School, and very strikingly, here was a house and landscape created in the 18th century, which would, but for the school coming, have been demolished 100 years ago. And yet the choices were made that were different. And now you have the fine building, you have a thriving school, you have the grounds maintained, and you have everything that goes with that. And those are choices that people took for their objectives, but with good advice.
You've witnessed huge shifts in the rural economy over the last 3 decades. Looking ahead, what excites you most about the opportunities emerging for the next generation of rural professionals?
I think it's dealing with the challenge we have coming, particularly as we deal with the more extreme weathers coming out of climate change, and how those factors influence markets for agricultural produce. And the UK is relatively, and I mean by that I do mean relatively compared to others, relatively better placed than, for example, the north side of the Mediterranean or many other parts of the world. We are facing very substantial challenges in farm management, coping with very hot, dry years, very wet and less warm years, and all the various mixes of those things. And then we've mentioned the new technologies as ways in which you might help manage them. Those pose very interesting questions, just as then we come to look at the kind of competition for land use that we've also talked about. And at farm level, a lot of that is about how we adapt to make the best of climate change, to produce food and other resources as best we can to make profits, to move ahead. And a lot of that then is about trying to find the ways for the most proficient farmers to have the use of the land on which they will farm best. And that gives us a lot of change in farm structures to think about in the coming years, so that we, with agreements that provide value both to the landowner and to the farmer. And that's where we, again, have to be very measured. We have to think about the future and handle it in as practical a way as possible.
What advice would you give to students?
To be interested in, as much as you can, in everything. One of the things that attracts people to this profession is they never know what's next in the in tray. There's always a new challenge, always a new question, and almost nothing is ever wasted in terms of finding new knowledge and trying to understand. So being interested, asking questions, that's a very broad point. Doubtless it's also useful elsewhere. If you want to come in a mainstream route, then land management, rural business are mainstream routes for doing it. But there are plenty of people who've come in by other routes and then done a postgraduate qualification or just trained on the job and come through, and then they can qualify through our examinations. Start as broad as you can, and then the world will find what it is that you most enjoy and what you're most likely to be best at. And with all the work that's changing at the moment, that is something I think particularly important. But they will say, and this may be terrifying to you, that every day is a school day is a common phrase. It is that there are new things to interest and intrigue. Get work experience. Find, and you can look on our website and see who may be local to you. Find somebody, and we're a very sociable profession. Find somebody who might take you in for a week or something like that, or maybe longer, and just find out what the work is actually like, and see if it's of interest, and if it sparks that little bit of extra enthusiasm, and then take that up. But keep the contact, build networks, talk to people, be involved in the rural economy and the rural world. So that boils down to taking an intelligent interest, seeking work experience, and then finding the course that suits you best. There are direct ways in, and that's where I would look at rural business and land management. But actually, there are ways of having something broader. And one of the things that with our route to rural work we're doing is recognizing that clients will be facing many new challenges. So having a wider range of skills is a benefit. Does that help you with the question?
Yes, thank you. For those of us interested in becoming a land agent or working in land management, do you have any last recommendations for us?
I slightly feel I've probably covered this one. Again, I think it's seeking out work experience. It's looking around you, and it's trying to understand the world. We live in quite a complex world. It matters our geologies, which drive our soils, which drive our drainage, which drive how we farm, very varied within quite short distances. And that gives England and Britain more generally a variety you don't find so readily in many other parts of the world. It's thinking, why do people do things? Or why did our ancestors do things? Because we're working with what they've left behind in the landscape that we have, as we will leave a landscape behind us. And it's thinking about all of that, being interested, and being interested in people, because there's a lot of technical material that we can talk about, and we've covered some of that. But your final work in this is that you're helping people. They have their own objectives. They have their own limitations. What somebody powerfully wants may actually matter more than making a profit. And it's thinking through what will deliver best for them and understanding them. And the real skill lies in that.
Jeremy, thank you very much. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I think many of us will leave with a sharper sense of just how complex and important your work really is.
Your insights into policy, land use, and the future shape of the countryside has given us plenty to think about.
We're grateful, and we hope this conversation encourages more young people to explore a profession that sits at the heart of Britain's landscape.
Next time you're passing Stone, great to meet you in person.
I'm very happy to do that, and thank you for those words. And indeed, about probably 8 years ago, we did hold a Young Valuers conference in Stowe School, and it went very well. Thank you.
Thank you.